In my opinion, one of the biggest misunderstandings is thinking that being fearless means having absolutely no fear. In my opinion, this could be a very unfair expectation to put on yourself. And to a certain degree, it often robs you of your very humanness. As human beings, we get to experience fear at times. I tend to think that being fearless actually means becoming so skillful at relating to your fears to the degree that they lose their ability to paralyze you. And this is what we're going to be exploring in this video. We're going to be exploring how to dissolve our fears. If you're new here, my name is Xavier Dagba, and the purpose of this space is to spark conversations that ignite self liberation. And in my opinion, dissolving our fears is at the core of it. So, as we're leaning into this, I would love to give some sort of like background image of the way we often relate to fear. Especially in spiritual communities, we have a very dismissive approach to fear. One very popular acronym out there is false evidence appearing real. Another one, false emotion appearing real. Or forget everything and run. These are a few acronyms that are there. And I understand that there are moments where, what we get to do is actually to move through these fears without giving them much thought. But most times it's actually not working. It is actually invalidating the fears that we're experiencing. Because sometimes we believe that we shouldn't even be experiencing the fears that we have. We have a tendency to be in denial. We almost gaslight ourselves when we're in fear. Like, I shouldn't be feeling this way. I shouldn't be afraid. And I'm not here trying to be an advocate of fear. No, that's not the intention here. The intention is to get you to even soften the way you are relating to fear in general, to bring in there even more compassion towards yourself. And then, yes, we're going to explore how you can actually dissolve it. But before that, it is important to acknowledge that trying to dismiss our fears, trying not to think about it, assuming that facing your fears or relating to your fears is actually low vibration, in my opinion, can be one of the most subtle forms of denial. You may even call it spiritual bypassing. In my opinion, one of the most high vibe things you will ever do is actually to face your fears. It is to bring a new quality of light to your fears so that they lose their capacity to paralyze you. So that's the background I would love to offer here. So how do we actually do that? In my opinion, it's important to recognize a few things. Let's say you have a big fear of something really dramatic happening to you. You have a big fear. I'm going to take an example here so that it makes more sense. Back in the day, let's say 10 to 15, 10 years ago, when I had my first big major credit card debt, and I was behind on payments. And a part of me was, just thinking that the police is going to knock on my door, put me in jail or something like that. Because back, where I grew up in Africa, and I've seen so many people who owe money to banks or other people being thrown to jail for owing money. And I was here thinking, well, because I was behind on payments, this is what was going to happen to me. It never happened. So I stayed in that spiral of fear. And that fear was actually fueled by ignorance. So very often we're going to be experiencing fear because we lack information. And there's an invitation there to become more knowledgeable. So that's one of the ways that fear can dissolve. Another way that fear will dissolve is actually when the fear has happened. And you may be like, whoa, whoa, whoa. This is not how I am attempting to dissolve my fears here. This is not really helpful. But I'm inviting you to just wait a second. Let me clarify you a little bit. When your fear has already manifested, you're no longer in fear. It is happening. It has happened. It is there. So you're no longer in fear. You're no longer in anxious expectation because it's already manifested. Now, here's the catch. Your mind does not make the difference between you experiencing a potential that you're afraid of and you thinking about experiencing a potential that you're afraid of. You immersing yourself in that vision. Your mind does not make the difference between all these two, whether it's it happening in real time or you just diving into that vision without running away from that vision. And this is just to give you a hint of how that process may actually work. So, on one end, how to dissolve fears, bringing more information, becoming more knowledgeable, like finding out, like what is actually going to happen. In my case, back then, what I wasn't aware of is like I wasn't going to be thrown in jail for, being behind on my payments, but the consequence would be something else. It would be impacting, credit score and things like that. And just becoming more knowledgeable got the fear to dissolve. And there are other types of fears that, having more information is not necessarily going to dissolve the fear. And how do we address those? One of the first things that I would love to say is turning towards our fearful parts. Let's take, for example, you're afraid of abandonment. There is that part of you that had experienced abandonment in the past. And if you don't know how to be with that part, regulate that part, it only makes sense that you will be afraid of experiencing that same fear in the future, of experiencing that same pain in the future. It only makes sense that you would be afraid of experiencing the same pain again if you really didn't know how to process it. So, one of the ways we actually dissolve our fears is to turn towards our fearful parts because they have a story to tell. Another way is actually imagine that you are afraid of being, let's take an example here. You're meeting your in laws for the first time, and you're afraid you're going to be criticized, and you're afraid it's going to be a disaster and things like that. There is one approach, trying not to think about it, and there's another approach, which is actually going in that image with an open heart in your mind and experiencing all the feelings that would actually come up if that fear was precisely what ended up happening without shutting down. What you're doing in that moment is actually to signify to the fearful part inside of you, this thing is not going to end me. When you're experiencing it and you actually stand in there, you are bringing the light of your own presence. And you are remaining conscious and present. What you're telling to yourself, to your psyche, is that you will not abandon yourself. Because the way we abandon ourselves is usually being unconscious. We tap out, we dissociate to a certain degree. When you are able to signify to your psyche, this fear is not going to cause me, or this potential, it is no longer a fear. It becomes now just a potential that you are in process of neutralizing. You are neutralizing the charge. When you're doing that, what you are also you're giving a message to your psyche. I know how to be present in this potential. This potential is not the end of me. This potential will not terminate me. And when you are able to do that, you are actually imprinting new neuronal connections in your own system that enable you to stand in there with a new quality of embodiment of presence and grace to who you are. So you are actually turning that potential into a fearless potential. So these are some of the ways you can begin to not only relate to your fearful parts, but also in your mind's eye, go through the experience of facing the fear-filled potential so that it can be dissolved. The highest invitation of fear is to bring light. Can you bring light into it? Can you bring more presence into it? If that fear was caused by sheer ignorance, lack of knowledge, by becoming more knowledgeable, you're bringing more light, you're bringing more transparency. When you are facing a fear in your mind's eye, or maybe having a conversation that you completely feared in your mind's eye, what you're doing is you're giving a signal to your psyche that this is not the end of me. You're bringing more light into it. I'm going to give you something that I often do. It's a practice of mine. Whenever I know that I have something that I'm really feeling anxious about, like a difficult conversation, I will usually mentally rehearse it. And I will practice grounding myself in the experience of mentally rehearsing it. Because that is signifying to my psyche, I know how to stand sovereign in this possible experience. And there is an explosion of light, of energy that becomes now available to me. The highest invitation of fear is to make us more soulful, to get us to embrace even more of the light of our soul. And that's where I would love to finish. And I'm inviting you to see soul here as an acronym itself. State of unconditional love, state of unlimited light, state of unlimited love, state of unlimited life. And when we live it from that place, we are able to dissolve our fears more and more. Does it mean that you will go through life having absolutely no fear? No. It means that you trust yourself to know how to dissolve these fears as they show up. And that is one of the greatest gifts you can have for yourself. One of the greatest gifts you can have for yourself. If this resonated with you to a certain degree, I'm inviting you to share it with people who might need it and to subscribe. Thank you for being here. And I'll see you in another video.